Hey, what's going on, guys? Is here once again. So this is going to be the second like PoB theorycraft video for 3.21. This one will be revolving around Ice Shot and some new mechanics and updated skills that we got going into 3.21. Ice Shot's one of those skills where like ice and like water is like my favorite like elemental archetype. That's something I like a lot of and I feel is like relatively underexplored in PoE. I feel like everything is always like fire and lightning based in this game, and I hate lightning skills in this game because I think they all look the same. So I really like water and ice themed stuff. There is like I guess a decent amount of it, but most of it's not really like even remotely viable, at least in HCSSF. So like in my eyes, I see like Cold Dot, and that's kind of like it if you want to play something with that fills that like fantasy, right? I guess before we get in the video, as always, I got to do my call to action. If you enjoy this video, you enjoyed my previous videos, or you're looking forward to content that's coming out, please do leave me a sub, like the video, comment. You guys did really great on the last one. Thanks so much. It helps a bunch with the algorithm, and I want to make the YouTube overlords happy. Aside from that, I am streaming live on Twitch, where I make these builds live with chat. So you want to go over there, be part of the process, and see what these videos are just over the course of many hours. Then you can head over there. And then as always, I have a Discord with like a build help channel and all that stuff. And then also Twitter too, if you're on there. Anyway, getting back into the build, Vaal Ice Shot. So Ice Shot is a skill that I've wanted to play forever. And they keep like teasing us with like, oh, we're buffing Ice Shot. Oh, we're buffing bows. Oh, we're buffing quiver. Like for a long time now. And every time I'm like, oh, maybe this is the league I can play Ice Shot. And I had the same feeling with Tornado Shot, but I finally got to sate that a little bit in the league where they added Exarch and Eater, because Omni allowed me to play Tornado Shot Omni. I do have a build diary for that. That character was great. Had a ton of fun on it. But this is obviously very different. And hopefully Ice Shot will be able to pass that line of viability with Vaal Ice Shot, though it's worth noting that we don't know how good it will be. So this is one of those things, kind of like Vaal Firestorm in a way, where like whether or not this actually equates to anything largely depends on how Vaal Ice Shot works, the numbers on it, the soul cost on it, the cooldown on it, how many uses it can store, stuff like that. Now, what Vaal Ice Shot basically does is kind of like Artillery Ballista. You'll summon a bunch of these clones that they seem to attack every time you attack. Yeah, firing again whenever you use Ice Shot. So they will shoot. The only thing that I can ascertain, they released a real short clip of it being used with no numbers or anything. And it seems like the base duration on Vaal Ice Shot is about 6 seconds. So that's one thing we know roughly. And the other part is how it interacts with support gyms. This is a big one on how good or bad this skill may end up being. Because in the video, as you can see right here, this character is using GMP or whatever. They have multiple projectiles coming through here. And the clones, you can kind of see it here. It showed a case in the video as well. This dude's using GMP. He's shooting a bunch of arrows. And the clones are all shooting one arrow. So they do not benefit from multiple projectiles. That's the first thing that we know. Other than that, I have no idea how else it could interact. Nobody does. If they tell you anything, they're probably lying. So that's all we really know. The base duration of it seems to be about 6 seconds. And they won't benefit from multiple projectiles. And that's pretty much it. Now, going into the actual PoB, what I decided to do this time is, surprise, we're playing Ascendant again, just because I think this happened to have a pretty good amount of synergy with it. And Deadeye is a really good Ascendancy, especially for playing softcore. However, Deadeye is always really risky when it comes to hardcore for like obvious reasons. There's very little like innate defense and whatnot, and there's some other things that I wanted to try to make this character really tanky. So we'll get into it here. One other thing that I wanted to try, this PoB is like not a final product or anything either. I think like ultimately you would want a cluster jewel setup for end game and stuff like that. This is just something to get it working. And this is something like if I spent a few more hours on this, I would probably come out with something different again. And the one big thing you may notice is that it's not a crit based build. So I wanted to see if I could get away with playing a bow build that was not crit based, which is honestly pretty wild, right? But with these nodes being changed and with how the placement of them is, Thread of Hope with the large number, you've probably seen this on Reddit. I assume it would be on Reddit. A bunch of people in my Discord have been talking about it. You can hit a ton of stuff with this Thread of Hope. Now, we don't take full advantage of this simply because we already passed through one with nature and stuff anyway. However, you can get a bunch of stuff here and save a ton of passive points on travel. So we get Primeval Force, which is 25 to 50% increased elemental damage. It's a very efficient node. And then we get to grab Master Fletcher without the travel nodes, which were more or less nerfed in a way. They did gain a little bit of attack speed, but they lost, like, I don't remember if it was crit or just generic damage, but they lost that. So these 3 travel nodes here, you can just grab this. So 1 passive point for +1 Proj, which is really good. And then you also can grab Multi-Shot up here, which is another +1 Proj. So you get +2 Proj on the tree with just this Thread of Hope, which is really, really nice. And then some damage down here as well. Now, aside from that, why did I decide to just try non-crit? Well, I figured it would be pretty easy to get Precise Technique up and running, especially with the new Accuracy Mastery that gives you +500 to Accuracy rating with -2 per level. And Acuity over here gives a bunch of extra global with some extra flat and then attack speed on the nodes leading up to it. Aside from that, the biggest thing that we're getting damage from, like outside of Precise Technique, is running Whispers of Doom to get an additional curse. So that way we can run a Sniper's Mark and then also run what is it called? Help me. Frostbite. Oh my gosh, I got lost. Okay, so you can run Sniper's Mark and you can run Frostbite. So if I scroll down here, this is, I believe, the single target setup, what I currently have in. It should be. It is. So this is a single target setup, and you can see it's about 2 million DPS. Now, this comes with 2 caveats. PoB does not inherently grab the DPS from Tornado. Basically, the way this will work is like Tornado will add like somewhere between like 400 to 600k full DPS on this, with the amount of damage it's getting, simply because we do more damage than our ballistas do, and the Tornado takes like 15 shots or whatever before it caps out. Now, you will be shooting 1 million arrows, so you will always hit that 15 threshold, but some of them will be ballista arrows and some of them will be your arrows, and how much DPS that ends up being is how much of it are your arrows versus your ballista. So somewhere between 400 and 600k from the Tornado. So you're at about 2.6 mil DPS, which is not anything crazy good. But this is, again, without Vaal Ice Shot, which is supposed to be what makes this like a good possible thing. And then the other part is Vengeant Cascade got mega buffed from 3.20. This is an Anoint only node, and it gives some Proj speed, returning projectiles pierce all targets, and this is the big one: attack projectiles return to you. So before it was attack projectiles return to you after hitting a target or whatever. Basically, this is just like Nimbus, as far as I can tell. This is literally just anointed Nimbus. It's really crazy. So, assuming you hit all of your projectiles, if I'm not mistaken, this is basically just a double damage anoint. Like, it's crazy. It's genuinely crazy. So, the thing to note here is basically you'd anoint this and you're already running point blank, so you would want to throw your ballistas up and then basically sit on the boss anyway. The Tornado will come out or whatever, and then you're just attacking, and all the arrows are going through the boss, they're doing whatever, and then they all come back, and then you more or less get to double dip on your damage. Now, this won't buff the damage of Tornado. Tornado is still only adding 400 to 600k to your DPS, but your actual full DPS here is potentially just double of what you see, so about 4 mil with Tornado, about 4.5 mil on average. And that's if all the projectiles are hitting. If you assume only 80% or whatever, then, you know, like 4.2, 4.3 mil. This is still really, really good, especially without Vaal Ice Shot by itself. And then we don't know if Vaal Ice Shot will also return the arrows, but if it did, that would be crazy. That'd be a ton more damage. So these are kind of the things that I am working around and taking into account when trying to make this build work. Once again, it does bear mentioning one last time that a lot of this revolves around how Vaal Ice Shot works. If we see the gym info on Vaal Ice Shot and it looks really bad, then you could still play this simply because the Vengeant Cascade thing just seems absolutely nuts to me. I think you would still be able to play this and have like no real issues. You could even try to transition into Omni late game, and once you get some cluster jewels in here as well, you would probably be able to do so much damage, especially if you're playing softcore. And I don't think it would be too much of an issue, but whether it's like really, really good or not is going to come down to, or I guess how good it is will come down to largely Vaal Ice Shot and how its mechanics work. It does look really good from the videos, but again, it's just a video. There's not even a UI. We have no idea to really ascertain what exactly it does and how it works. And a big part of it is also uptime. Anyway, so what are some key mechanics to the build? Basically, like I said, we want to utilize precise technique instead of going crit. This is just basically EO in a way on this side of the tree. We get 40% more attack damage if accuracy rating is higher than life, which is not too hard to get, honestly. Not too hard to get because we are running Acuity, like I said, with the new accuracy mastery. You just need a little bit of accuracy on your rings and you should be pretty much good to go, even though the build has relatively high life. This is because we are also running the precision tech with arrogance to reserve a little bit of our life. And the reason we're doing that is because we are utilizing, once again, with the Ascendancies, the Slayer Scion Ascendancy and the Deadeye Scion Ascendancy. So Slayer, to go over this, is Culling Strike. Life Leech effects are not removed when unreserved life is filled, so we get Overleech. 30% increased AoE if you've killed recently, and cannot take reflected physical damage, which doesn't affect us at all. However, Culling Strike is really nice. Overleech is a really strong defensive layer, and then 30% increased AoE if you've killed recently is good because that buffs the AoE of the cone on Ice Shot, which, if you're curious, this is the radius. 26 radius on the explosion seems absolutely crazy to me because you're going to be shooting out a bunch of these projectiles. They're going to be forking out into more projectiles. They're going to hit a bunch of stuff, and then they're all going to come back and hit stuff on the way back and full pierce everything. So the clear on this should be absolutely crazy, and the AoE on this is really big. It should be very satisfying to play, even if you're not using Herald of Ice, and I can go over later. If you do want to use Herald of Ice, there are some changes you can make to fit that in. Anyway, so we're using Slayer Ascendancy with Path of the Duelist just to save a few passive points traveling over to this side of the tree. And then our other Ascendancy is Deadeye. So I originally was using Raider like I was with some of the other builds, but this is, you know, this is Spell Suppress, it's Onslaught, and Frenzy Charges while bossing with free phasing. Now there's some issues here. Basically, this would be like permanent Onslaught is all we're really getting from this. You can see right here from the tree alone and other things, we get mega overcapped on spell suppression, so we don't really care about that. So that benefit of Raider is gone. Move speed is nice, but I'm not taking an Ascendancy node for it. Phasing is really easy to get from a Flask, and that's the only time you're going to need it. Phasing is while mapping. You don't care about it while bossing at all. And while mapping, you're going to have essentially virtually 100% uptime on your Flask no matter what. And then the 10% chance to get a Frenzy Charge when you hit a rare unique enemy gets taken care of by the Mark Mastery. We literally get that for free on the Mark Mastery, so we don't have to worry about that at all. And the very last part over here is Onslaught on full Frenzy Charges. So that's effectively all we lost, was just perma Onslaught, which Onslaught you're going to have 100% time while mapping anyway. So you just lost Onslaught on bosses, which sucks, but the alternative vastly outweighs that small buff, and that is Deadeye. So what does Deadeye give? 25% increased effect of your marks is insane. Projectiles gain damage as they travel further, dealing up to 50% increased damage with hits to targets. Basically, this will just give you more damage while mapping. It'll probably prevent some stragglers in some cases, though it shouldn't be too much of an issue. You're probably going to be destroying everything while mapping, no issues. Your skills fire an additional projectile. This is a big one. And then you and nearby allies have Tailwind. Now, Tailwind is a huge buff. 8% action speed globally is really, really nice. When you pair this with the boot implicit, at the very minimum, you're getting 12% increased action speed. Now this buffs everything. This is move speed, attack speed, cast speed, whatever. It buffs everything. So this node is really, really strong. It helps our clear, it helps our single target, it helps our mobility, helps everything across the board. Very, very strong defensive node. Now, if you did not want to take this node, there are alternatives. You could potentially take Juggernaut. This would make you stun immune, chill immune, give you free endurance charge generation, and plus 1000 accuracy means that you would need to grab no accuracy on your gear at all to sustain precise technique. You could also potentially grab Berserker, because Berserker is 15% more damage. And then you also get a ton of rage, which may open up the ability to use Berserk often for good burst. And then also stun immunity, which is also, again, also is very, very good. Aside from that, there is Inquisitor, which gives a little bit of pen and stuff. But nothing too crazy. I think a Marauder, if you really didn't want to do Deadeye, would be probably the second best choice. Anyway, aside from that, what can we do with Overleech? So just like in the last PoB video, I was talking about how much they buffed Leech. This is once again a recurring theme. Leech is really crazy now. We take Vitality Void, we grab the Leech Mastery for 25% increased maximum Leech. And we also grab Clever Thief, which gives us a little bit of life and mana gain on hit. And another Leech Mastery for 10% of Leech is instant. And this is the crux of the build, okay? This is a huge part of why this functions. Now, this mechanic that I'm about to explain is not at all mandatory, but I fit it in. You don't need this for the build to work. And I'm not even set on whether or not this is the way you should play this yet. Like I said, the tree's not finished, but it seems very, very strong. I wanted to make a video on this specific thing by itself. Whether I do or don't, you guys, I guess, let me know in the comments if you want a video on it. But Strength of Blood, this was one of the first things I thought about when they said they were returning instant life leech in some ways. So what does Strength of Blood do? Life recovery from non-instant leech is not applied. 1% less damage taken for every 2% life recovery per second from leech. This is insanely strong. So the reason you didn't see this used much in the past is because if I invest a lot into Leech, and then I invest a lot into like all my Overleech, all the nodes, I use Vaal Pack to double it, like I'm taking away like my life regen. I have no ways to regen life or anything at that point, and Leech is completely turned off. So I don't have any form of recovery, more or less. However, with instant Leech, we can now fit Strength of Blood into a lot more builds than some old, like, kind of niche gimmicky ones. We can just plug it into a lot of stuff. So it's really strong. So you only get damage reduction while you're leeching, which is why Overleech is important, and it's why we go for the Slayer node. However, we're not actually benefiting from this Leech at all. The only Leech we're really getting is from all of our life gain on hit and our instant Leech. Now, you may think, why would you invest so much in this Leech and then effectively turn it off? Well, the reason is because, and you can even invest more here to get even more Overleech, and the reason why you might do that is because of how much damage reduction you can realistically get from this, right? So this is 1% less damage taken for every 2% life recovery per second from Leech. So assuming you cap out your Leech chance here, you're getting almost like, what, like 50 to 60% of your Leech here, of your life pool. And then obviously you would half that. So you're getting like, you know, 25 to 30% less damage taken. So this is like super, super strong. You can see here how much clicking this node adds. It's almost 40% max hit increase and EHP increase. It's a really, really strong node. And you sit there and you're like, well, do you want a bunch of life gain on hit and some Overleech and leech a lot of your life per second? Or do you want to take like literally 30% less damage all the time and then also still get your life gain on hit? The life gain on hit just seems like the better deal for me, especially on a build that hits so fast. This 10% of Leech is instant is more or less just life gain on hit, right? Like that's really all this stat really is. So if you're playing a build and you have a Mirage Archer hitting and you're sitting there and single target with Barrage and it's like, like your HP is topping off all the time anyway. and then you get to take 30% less damage on top of that. The cool thing about this build too is that you in some ways get to maintain some form of passive regen that isn't just life gain on hit, because we are utilizing Mirage Archer. So if, you know, if we take some damage or whatever, and we're like moving in the middle of a mechanic or something, or we're just running along and we don't happen to be attacking and something hits us, well, our Mirage Archer's out and he's always casting. So every time he's casting, he counts as our damage, right? So we're still getting procs of the life gain on hit from that, which is really cool. So that is kind of the actual sustain and the defense on the build, is that we just take way less damage from sources and then rely on instant leech for our actual sustain. Hope that makes sense. So that's kind of like the idea here behind all this. Now, if you decided that you don't want to do Strength of Blood, that's easy. You can unclick this and all this leech is just applied to your character instead. Like I said, undecided on whether or not I'll actually run it, but it seems to be incredibly strong, especially when paired with things like Spell Suppression Cap and Molten Shell and, you know, all the generic stuff that we've had forever. So something to keep in mind for sure. Seems very, very, very good going into 3.21. I think you'll see Strength of Blood on a lot of builds. Anyway, with that out of the way, just a bunch of typical stuff here, pathing through a bunch of life. We're getting, you know, Proj speed and stuff where you can. One thing I should mention is on your Lethal Pride, there's a few stats you're going to want. Reduced damage taken from critical strikes is good. Chance to deal double damage is a really, really strong notable you can get. There's another one, which is chance to intimidate on hit. That one is also super good. So the stats like those, increased armor is another good one for defense. Those are kind of the ones you're probably going to want to look for. Chance to deal double damage, increased armor, intimidate on hit, reduce damage from crits. There's a decent amount of good ones, though a fair bit of them are also melee oriented, like melee damage, melee crit chance, fortify, stuff like that. Anyway, that kind of sums it up on the Lethal Pride. A lot of other stuff on the tree. You go Winter Spirit, obviously. So Ice Shot's different from things like Tornado Shot because you don't want to stack flat Ellie. It's full Fizz conversion. So the gym, if I recall correctly, is 60% Fizz converted to cold by default. So we want a cold mastery to get our last 40%. And then Winter Spirit is additional 10% here. Something else that I'm utilizing in this build, Mark the Prey is really good. Marked enemies take 10% increased damage. It's a really strong node. And then, like I said earlier, that's also how we're getting our Mark Mastery for Frenzy charges while bossing. And the other big thing is grabbing a Fizz Mastery. And why are we grabbing a Fizz Mastery? Well, first off, this mastery is actually, or this node cluster is really strong. You have a bunch of % increased Fizz damage going into here, but you also get attack and cast speed on the nodes. And then the large node is a bunch of attack and cast speed and 10% of Fizz gained as extra chaos damage, which is a pretty big damage buff by itself. Like, this is a good cluster by itself. But then we get to grab the mastery on top of it, which is 10% more maximum physical attack damage. And we benefit from this because we're converting physical damage into cold. So this also buffs our damage as well. And this is one of the new Fizz masteries they added. So this is really strong by itself. And then, like I said, Whispers of Doom and Influence for more reservation-related stuff. The masteries I'm running on this are just auras, have 10% increased effect on you, and 8% increased damage for each aura or herald skill affecting you. Now, you can drop one of these if you want to grab this instead. This is plus 1% all maximum resistances if you have reserved life and mana. Since we have Arrogance linked to Precision to fit in an extra aura into the build, you can grab this if you want for one additional max res. So kind of depends on what you want to do. If you want to drop a little bit of damage to get it, or if you want to drop the aura effect. Moving on from there, we path into Overcharged. This is a similar thing that you will see from my previous video. I think this charge mastery is really good because it solves charges forever for you while mapping, and then it makes it really trivial to solve it for bossing as well. So for bossing, we have Frenzy Charge uptime via Mark Mastery, and then on our chest piece, we have Gain Endurance Charge every 15 seconds. So with this mastery making our charge duration 20 seconds, it means that we will permanently sustain endurance charges passively. And then this mastery by itself, 10% chance to gain a frenzy charge when we're hitting 1,000,000 times a second. When we're hitting 1,000,000 times a second, and it's 10%, and the charges last 20 seconds, you're going to have 100% uptime on max frenzy charges while bossing as well. And then you just don't need to care about it while mapping, simply because overcharged by itself is going to be giving you a 14 whatever percent chance, or 12% chance per kill to give you all these charges while mapping. Very, very strong little 4-pointer there for sure. Reflexes and the evasion mastery for 15% chance to suppress spell damage. If all your equipped things have all your armor has on evasion. And then Mage Bane, life nodes, pathing towards left for Constitution, and the life mastery, just more life, spitting more life into the build. On the bottom side of the tree, near precise technique, we have thick skin. We obviously grab point blank. It's a 30% more damage increase. So why wouldn't you take it? And then this is also, we have to path to the left here to grab Vitality Void and Vault Pact. And then just pathing out of the Duelist. Duelist start, simply because it's just slightly better than pathing like down from Scion here. You could also potentially grab the Ranger start instead, and then use the 3 passive points here to link the tree here, and then just drop these points like all the way up to here. And then maybe that's what I would do when I was trying to fit in cluster jewels. Maybe that's what I would do. Just grab the Raider start instead. So I spend 3 passive points here, which is these 3, and then you save 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 passive points. And then you would be able to path, you know, like the cluster jewel here, spend 3 on that, and then just cull a little bit of passive points somewhere else. You would be losing some life though, so you would maybe want to get life on your cluster jewels or grab a little bit of life somewhere else. Just something to keep note of. But for the life masteries, I'm using a flat 50 life on that mastery, and on this one, 15% increased life if there's no life on your body armor. That mastery currently does not work, so I added config for it. And yeah, one thing I did forget to mention is that I fit in Aspect of the Eagle in this Thread of Hope as well. It's just a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of damage, and attack speed. It's nothing crazy, but for 1 point, it's pretty good. I believe that's pretty much everything when it comes to the passive tree. Like, nothing super crazy here in terms of pathing. Like I said, at late game, you'd probably want to fit in some cluster jewels, because projectile cluster jewels tend to be really, really strong. One thing that I think is really, really cool about this build is for the clearing setup, simply for mapping, if we go down in here and we look at our DPS while mapping, it shoots up to like 2.8 mil baseline here. It's worth noting though that you're not going to be using your single target barrage gym swap for this. So what I would probably take out while mapping is barrage support, and you'd be putting in port in its place. And then if you did want to fit in GMP, you would probably drop Cold Pen, because Cold Pen doesn't really do a lot for like most monsters in the game, like normal monsters and stuff. They have pretty low resistance values. So Cold Pen is typically just like one of those like bossing related support gems. So you could even, like, if you had white sockets, instead of Cold Pen while mapping, you could use Ewa, even if you don't want to use GMP. Like, you have other things that are going to give you more relative damage while mapping. That out of the way, though, the only thing you would change, like, mandatory, is take out Barrage, so you have some, you know, some clear, and use Fork instead. Something else you can do is grab, you could spend 1 passive point here to grab Split Shot. Projectiles have 50% chance for an additional projectile while forking. And then you can even grab 50% increased fork angle here if you want. This small passive here is an additional 25%, which is nice, but it's not in the Thread of Hope range, sadly. I don't think it's worth pathing all the way out here if you are using the Thread of Hope setup, though, just to get that. And the reason I think you probably don't even need GMP for mapping on this build, so Fork alone is going to fork projectiles, right? And the thing is, we get +1 Proj here, so now we're at 2 ice shot projectiles. We get +1 shot here, so now we get 3 projectiles, and then we get +1 here. So now we have 4 projectiles for free. So we're basically running LMP for free baseline, and then we're gonna shoot out 4 projectiles. They're gonna fork into 8 projectiles, and then with split shot, you have a 50% chance for it to create another one while forking, right? So that's like an additional 2 proj. So you have about 10 projectiles going out when you fire once. And then when you have your Vengeant Cascade anoint, and this is not a super crazy anoint, it's only 2 golds and an amber. It's not even like a 3 gold anoint or something, you know what I mean? This is only like at maximum like 2 to 3 days of blight, and that's if you don't like spec it, you know what I mean? It's really not hard to get gold oils in current PoE. So from an SSF point of view, so you know, you shoot out these like 10 projectiles on average, and then they're all going to come back to you and pierce everything. So like, I don't think you even need GMP to map on this build. That almost sounds like overkill to me. Of course, you can always do it if you want to. I'm just saying it doesn't feel necessary, and you could just get more damage instead. Like, instead of running this cold pen, you could use right here, elemental damage with attacks instead, and get a little bit more damage. But it totally depends on what you want to do and how comfortable you are with swapping supports and stuff like that. But yeah, baseline, when you're mapping, you'll use fork. When you're bossing, you'll use barrage, and you'll just swap between the 2 of them, and it really is that simple. And then in our ballista setup, let me change this back so I don't forget. In our ballista setup, we are using ice shot, cold pen, focus ballista, ballista totem, barrage support, and multiple totems. So funnily enough, multiple totems was really, really close in DPS to, I believe, I don't remember what it was. I think it was Ewa or something. They were very, very close in damage values. And I was like, I'm just going to use multiple totems. Because the damage values are basically the same, and I need to cast, without multi-totem support, I need to cast the same amount of times to get my maximum number of totems out. Multi-totem just gives a bunch of extra totem placement speed, so it would just make it faster and smoother. So I was like, okay, well, we'll just do that then. Like, no problem. And then we have Tornado. In our helmet here, we have Tornado, Defiance, Banner, Determination, and Hatred. If you wanted to, you could probably put it in like a trigger setup or a cast when damage taken setup if you really wanted to on the Tornado. Up to you. I have with some builds in the past used a trigger helmet, so I just bench crafted on the helmet, so I don't need to worry about cast speed or anything like that. But it, you know, again, up to you, whatever you want to do and how you want to get around it. Sniper's Mark, with Mark on hit, Frostbite, Flame Dash. So we have Mark on hit. You could potentially try to automate your Frostbite if you don't want to have to manually cast it like once every 15 seconds or whatever it is. Or 12 seconds. But, you would lose a decent amount of damage from that. Like, not a crazy amount, but you would lose some damage from that. But if you want the quality of life, that's something you can definitely do. And then we already covered the main links. And then in our boots, I just have my cast when damage taken Molten Shell set up with Arrogance and Precision linked up as well. So that's all the links. Yeah, nothing too crazy here. There's a bunch of other stuff you could do if you wanted to. We don't really need Blood Rage in this build to sustain frenzies at all. Though, if you did want to fit in Blood Rage in a like an unset ring or something, it would be a damage boost. Just do keep in mind that it will be degenning you, and we have foregone regen through Vaal Pact and Strength of Blood, so our only life gain is life gain on hit. You would still be able to 100% out sustain pretty much all damage you're taking because of how fast you hit on this build and how much you'd be proccing your life gain on hit. But in my experience, on builds that don't have Overleech, Blood Rage or sources that degen you can be mildly annoying. like in some bosses or whatever, where they like Exarch teleports away before he summons his balls, and you're just sitting there really awkwardly for 10 seconds with your health degenning. Something you could definitely do though. If I had to guess, Blood Rage would be like probably like a 7 to 8% damage increase. 8.9%. Yeah, so you could definitely fit that in if you wanted to get some more damage, some more attack speed in there, but probably not mandatory. Anyway, that's basically the tree. That's basically the gems. Now let's get into the items. Nothing super crazy here. All I did here was craft a just generic like a fizz weapon. There is something to note here. It's really relatively easy to get +1 arrow on your bow, so you could potentially go into maps on this build. Well, not go into maps, but you could potentially, with relatively low investment, get 5 arrows on this build without GMP. And then quiver, the weighting on that, when I checked Craft of Exile, it was like 1 in 300 to get a decent life roll and +1 arrows on a quiver, with like 65% certainty or whatever. So that's like roughly about the same odds as like trying to land like +1 to spells on a wand, or +1 to chaos spells or whatever on a wand, with no weighting. So, you know, it's not like super hard to get. Like if this is a build that you were actually going to like sit down, craft gear on, and like commit to, you'd be able to get +1 quiver if you wanted to as well, which puts you at 6 projectiles. But again, this is already overkill. Just worth noting that you have other sources of plus Proj. I really don't think you would need GMP to clear on this build. And then you would also want the plus projectiles anyway, because when you're using barrage support, that literally just translates to more damage. So something to note there. But all I did was basically throw on Shrieking Contempt essences until I hit at least tier 4 hybrid %fizz. And then you can just throw on benchcraft on attack speed and T1 benchcrafted %fizz damage. There's a bunch of different ways to craft fizz weapons. You can get hybrid fizz and then benchcraft on you could like multi-mod. Well, you could throw on like prefixes can't be changed and then ashling it, and then 50-50. If it hits a prefix, it'll give you % increased unveil, % physical damage unveil. If it hits a suffix, it'll give you like attack speed. So like there's a bunch of different ways to craft fizz weapon. This is not like anything, like this is not an unrealistic weapon at all to get. This is probably the equivalent of a like 600 to 700 PDPS axe. It's nothing super crazy. On the quiver, all I did was put life, increase damage with bow skills, attack speed, and increase effective marks. Increase effective marks is a essence mod, so I basically would just hit it with a few essences until I got 2 of these, and then benchcraft on the last one effectively. And if you're wondering about the base, you can kind of choose whatever base you want out of like the normal common bases. According to PoB, the flat fizz base from Heavy Quiver was just slightly better than Broadhead, I believe, which is the attack speed one. However, attack speed, I mean, we're talking like 0.3, 0.4% or something. And Broadhead, all that attack speed would add some extra quality of life or whatever too. So just depending, you can kind of use whatever. I just threw in whatever was the highest on paper DPS. In the helmet slot, we just have a pig face bassinet with life and spell suppress. I didn't even actually add implicits on this yet. So for influences, Exarch and Eater. And as usual with my POBs, if you see an item that only has 2 stats on it, the implication there is that that's where you're getting your resistances from. If it only has a few stats, you should be using those open suffix slots to be getting your resistances sorted. For Exarch, there's a few different things you can do. If you wanted to fit Herald of Ice into the build, you would want to take the Eater of Worlds mana reservation efficiency node. If you don't care about, and that's about a 10% damage increase for the build too, if you decide to go for that. If you don't care, you can take Cold Pen, which is going to be really good. You could also take % increased attack damage. And if you care about defensive, you can take Fizz taken as, you know, whatever element, right? And for the Searing Exarch mod, basically you can take increased curse effect for frostbite. You can take reduced mana cost of attacks, or you can take is that it? Yeah, that's basically it. You could take those two. I don't think the plus maximum res is worth it. So you could take frostbite, curse effect, or mana cost. Nothing super crazy there. So that's it for the helmet. And then in the chest piece, we have Hatred R effect. You can run Determination R effect if you want defensive, more defense instead. And then gain an endurance charge every 15 seconds on the Exarch influence. That's how we're sustaining endurance charges. Worth noting that I crafted the chest piece for physical damage reduction and spell suppress, and left open the prefixes. So you would just want to put in like % increase armor and evasion here maybe. And then benchcraft on physical taken as elemental for the hits. And fill your prefixes with that way. So like that. And you would want to do this because you want to utilize the life mastery of 50% increased max life if there's no life on your body armor, which means you can itemize way more aggressively on your chest piece. Moving on to the gloves. Once again, this is a really important slot. Basically, we want max life and spell suppression and increased damage while leeching. Now again, it is worth noting that you don't need all this spell suppression. You can drop a fair bit of spell suppression and still cap. And early game, what you can do is just grab Inveterate for a few points here for a bunch of free spell suppression, or Entrench if you only need a little bit of spell suppression. Depends on what you want to do. There's also Quick Step here, which is a bunch of extra spell suppression, and even small passives here, even more spell suppression. So you can spend a few passive points in some places to get very, very early spell suppression cap. So don't worry about it too much. There's a million different ways to cap it on this build. So you don't need to really stress about getting spell suppression every slot. Like you can even see here, every slot has like my helmet, boots, and gloves all have T2 spell suppression, and then my body armor has like T3 spell suppression, and they're not even max rolled either. So it's like whatever, right? And it's already super overcap without taking other stuff. It is worth noting though that I do have always on full life to simulate the damage on full life support gym DPS increase. So this is actually 30% overcap instead of 40. Which is still ridiculous, right? But worth noting. So on the gloves. Yeah, so onto the gloves. The implicits are really important here. We gain 1 rage on hit with attacks, no more than once every 1.2 seconds. So we'll have some rage while bossing, and then inflict cold exposure on hit, applying 11% to cold resistance. So this is how you're getting exposure. Before you get your Eldritch implicit, you will just run probably Frostbite linked with Hydrosphere in a Arcanist brand. It's probably going to be the easiest way to sort that. Or you could just run a Frostbomb as well. A Frostbomb does have that cooldown though. So that's something you'll need to keep in mind. You can also just cast them independently of each other and not use Arcanist brand if you don't want to. Totally up to you, whatever you want to do. Moving on from there onto the boots, we have action speed on the Exarch implicit and cooldown recovery rate of travel skills on the Eater. Cooldown recovery rate on travel skills on Eater influence simply because this build is using a bow, which means we're very reliant on Flame Dash. So more cooldown reduction on Flame Dash is always a win. Beyond that, the stats on it are just life, spell suppress, and bench crafted on move speed with onslaught on kill. This is obviously how you're getting your onslaught while mapping. Moving on to the amulet, we're using an amber amulet. I just crafted life and Ewa with bench crafted damage while leeching, and then anointed Vengeant Cascade. Very important for damage on that one. That's a very big anoint. Now in our Vermilion rings, we just have life and accuracy, and then bench crafted on Elrion crafts. That helps with getting mana costs down, so we don't need to worry about life tapping stuff. Stygian Vise, we just bench crafted with strength essences, and then until we hit life, bench craft on Ewa. And then our Murderous Side Jewel, I just have life and some Chaos Res to simulate what I would probably end up taking. Flask, as always, we have our Divine Life Flask. All of the Life Flasks are rolled Flagellants. If you don't get, like, obviously Flagellants is optimal. If you don't get +3 charges on hit, +1 or +2 are fine too. It's just you want to aim in the prefix slot for charges gain on hit. So on the Life Flask, we have Bleed removal and CB removal. Granite, we're using increased armor while active. On Jade, we're using increased elemental resistance. This is to counter exposure and curses while mapping. Quicksilver, we're running reduce effective curses, and Quartz, we're running reduce effective shock. So that's everything here on the equipment side. And I believe that is more or less everything with the build. Like I said, if you guys want to see the config, I just have this cap to simulate what our defenses are with max resistances. The 15% increased maximum life, like I said before, because the node is broken. Over here, I set it to about 40 rage. You can set this to whatever you feel comfortable. Obviously, I didn't want to cap the rage out. Whatever you're going to be sitting at while bossing is what you want to sit the rage value at. Sometimes you'll be above this, sometimes you'll be below this. I tried to just find an average. Are you leeching is checked because obviously we're leeching. Have you killed recently? This is checked for the Slayer AoE. And then Intimidate is checked for the Lethal Pride. So if you don't have Intimidate on Lethal Pride or on your gloves or whatever, then don't check that. Aside from that, we have Exposed to Cold. Even unchecking this doesn't do anything because we have it on gloves, so PoB will just take that innately. Projectile travel distance, I have this set to 1. It doesn't really matter what you set this to. Basically, this is just to showcase the damage gain from point blank. Up here, do you use frenzy charges? Yes, we have 100% uptime on frenzy charges while bossing and mapping, so that is checked. Endurance charges, yes, we have permanent endurance charges via chest and charge mastery. Do you have tailwind? Yes, we do. Unchecking this doesn't do anything. We get permanent tailwind from our ascendancy. So that's everything on the config. And then always on full life, like I said before, is checked to simulate the damage increase of damage on full life. And you can always spend 1 passive point on a life mastery here. You count as full life while at 90% of maximum life or below if you feel like you're not getting your extra damage from that. You can also, if you want to, just use Ewa instead of damage on full life. Because they're basically the same thing. So really whatever you want to do, it shouldn't really matter. There's a 0.3% damage difference, so knock yourself out. Whatever you feel like doing. I hope this was interesting to you guys. I hope it looks cool. It seemed cool to me. Definitely seems like it'll be playable. This is also, I think even if Vaal Ice Shot isn't anything crazy, this build is strong enough on its own without including Vaal Ice Shot to be played for sure. Simply because Vengeant Cascade being buffed is basically roughly a ×2 multiplier to your damage anyway. When you pair that, even if you don't include Tornado at all, you're going to be doing like 3.8 mil to 4 mil DPS. And that's not even including Crucible weapon trees. So every PoB that I'm making, these are the numbers we're getting without Crucible weapon trees, which look to be some of the most insane power creep we've gotten in the game since like Old Harvest and stuff. Like, I don't think that this is going to go core, but this definitely looks like a league where we will just be able to play around and make a bunch of stuff that would otherwise be bad, be viable, no problem. It's kind of given me that type of Harvest-esque, Ritual-esque vibe. Just because of how strong the trees look from what they've showcased. There is always the chance, that, you know, we get like scourged, right? Where like the trees are 90% of the time garbage and it's really hard to find useful trees and stuff. But I don't think that's going to be the case at all. So just take whatever we have here baseline and it will only go up with the new Crucible trees. So do keep that in mind when looking at all these new builds. This is without Crucible being factored in at all. So a lot of these builds are probably going to feel quite powerful to play. With all that out of the way, thanks a bunch. This one was fast compared to the last one. The last one was like a good 20 or 30 minutes longer than this one. Thanks a bunch. If you made it all the way to the end, be sure to let me know down in the comments. As always, if you appreciate the content that I put out, if you're interested in seeing more from me or you would like to support me, please do subscribe. Helps a bunch. Lets me know I'm doing stuff right. If you want to help support me, like I said, you can like the video, comment, ring the little bell icon for notifications whenever I upload videos, all that good stuff pertaining to YouTube. You can also join my Discord where we are constantly talking about PoE and other related games, as well as I have a build help channel in there, maybe help you sort out your build starter, stuff like that, or your league starter, excuse me. And do note that I'm a HCSSF only Andy. It's like the only game mode I've ever really played. So some super niche trade related stuff I probably won't be able to help you with, but in general, I'm there to give advice if people want it or need it. And finally, I am on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter, feel free to drop me a follow, where sometimes I just randomly scream into the void of nothingness that is Twitter. With that out of the way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you're looking forward to 3.21, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.